So welcome everyone. So happy to see so many people joining us today. Thank you also to those who turn on their cameras because it's nice to see also your faces and know where you're from in the chat. So I'm Benjamin from Combatants for Peace. I'm very happy to welcome you today to this discussion. It's a discussion we thought was important to have around the topic of language in the conflict. So this discussion will try to answer many questions. How do we talk about the conflict? What words should we use to remain true to the facts in a context of polarized and politicized public debate? As you may know, language is yet another tool weaponized in the conflict to define spaces according to political narratives, but also to exclude, deny rights, and the very reality of the occupation. So for example, whenever we publish a post on social media that includes the word West Bank, we almost always automatically get a comment saying there is no such thing as the West Bank and that it should be called Judea and Samaria. The purpose of this type of comments is usually to deny the historical ties of the Palestinians to the land, which could then legitimize their ethnic cleansing, which is ongoing, as you know. But Judea and Samaria also resonate deeply with the spirituality and the history of the Jewish people. So one must ask themselves in what context is a certain terminology being used and whether it advances a specific political agenda. And I could go on with more examples. For example, what are the implications of saying protective fence instead of separation wall, or Arab Israelis instead of Palestinian citizens of Israel? So this is the kind of things we're gonna explore today with our partner. This is not an ulpan. Well, in fact, it is, but a different kind of ulpan. So for those of you who don't know, an ulpan is a language school mostly designed to teach Hebrew intensively to new immigrants coming to Israel. So it is state-sponsored and part of the Aliyah process. But here, this is not an ulpan, is run by a cooperative of language teachers and students who teach Arabic and Hebrew with a deep connection to history, culture, society, and awareness of the realities of the occupation. But Tal will explain this better than I do, and I will soon hand it over to them. But a second before I do that, I just want to welcome my colleague Lindsay from our American friends, who will take your questions throughout this discussion. She's now saying hi on her screen. Her name in the chat is Send Questions here. So if you can send your questions to her directly, it would help us sort them out, and she will make sure to pass them on to me during the Q&A at this end of this session. And now we have 250 people, so this is the time I hand it over to Tal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Benjamin. You need to allow me to screen share. It's not I think I'm a participant now instead of a co-host.
Okay, now you should be able to.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you've joined us this evening. Today's talk is about language as a tool for social change and about linguistic justice. I am a language teacher. I teach Hebrew, English, and Arabic. I teach Hebrew in This Is Not an Ulpan. And I also am an activist in Jerusalem and in the West Bank as well. I will talk more about This Is Not an Ulpan later on in the presentation. Before we get right in, I want to start by thinking about this term linguistic justice. And I'd love it if you could write in the chat associations that you have to this term or examples of things that are connected to linguistic justice as you see it. It could be from the context of Palestine and Israel. It could be from the context of where you live. But go for it. Put some of your thoughts in the chat so we can start ourselves thinking. And I will open the chat up on my computer and read some of these out. Using the indigenous name for places. Thank you, Rachel. Illegal immigrant. Speaking in own dialect. Through the lens of soul justice. Not using language as a weapon. Calling out Orwellian doublespeak. Very, very relevant in our reality today. Erasing history. Understanding dual narratives. Speaking truth to power. Using the names that people use for themselves, recognizing more than one narrative, pronouns, the power and change of language over time, ICE. The language of ASL belongs to deaf people. They have a right to use their language. Not using language to collude with trauma and racialized structures. Truth-telling. Israel-Palestine or Palestine-Israel. Calling apartheid of Israel over Palestinians a conflict, reclaiming negative terms, twisting definitions, Arab or Palestinian West Bank or Judea and Samaria, Green Line or occupied territory, Holy Land, Nakba as a war crime instead of genocide, using the term fragile or so-called ceasefire when there has not been a ceasefire, willingness to have this conversation, the term illegal alien, listening to the voice of others. Okay, great. I'm going to stop reading here, but please keep reading what people have put in the comments. It's really, really great ideas and examples here. Press not identifying who did the bombing. The term woke. Okay, I'm going to stop there. These are great. Thank you. So, linguistic justice. We're going to look today at three overlapping arenas of linguistic justice and ask questions about what they mean. So, linguistic justice in society. What is the relationship between different languages in the context of Israel-Palestine? We will mostly be looking at Hebrew and Arabic. Tell us about the power dynamics between their speakers. Within the language itself, and I will be mostly looking at Hebrew because I'm mostly a Hebrew teacher. Why are some ways of communicating considered more correct than others? And what does this tell us about power dynamics in society? And within the classroom, how can the classroom be an arena for learner empowerment and social change? And while we're looking at these three topics, I want us to keep in mind that languages reflect social norms and power relations. The S got cut off there. Anyway, languages reflect social norms and power relations, but they also reinforce them. So let's get stuck in. We're going to start with the topic of language itself and power dynamics within it, in general and in Hebrew. So first of all, what is a mistake? In linguistics, there's different ways to think about mistakes. The traditional way, or the way that people generally think about mistakes in language comes from what's called prescriptive grammar. Prescriptive, like to prescribe, to say this is the way things should be. I put a picture of a frame there because it's like this idea that language is something that should stay the same, that should be kept like framed on the wall, and that there's an authority for language. That authority might be ancient texts, it might be other kinds of texts. In the case of Hebrew, it's the Academy for the Hebrew Language. But there is a correct way to speak and an incorrect way to speak, and there's an authority that tells us how. So this is the traditional prescriptive grammar. And most people, when they hear that I'm a language teacher, they have in mind that I'm this kind of person, that I'm going to tell them what's the right and wrong way to speak. However, the dominant approach in the academic field of linguistics today is very different. It's descriptive grammar, which means describing language and assuming that language is a living, changing thing that can't be and shouldn't be fixed in one way, and that is always reflecting the diversity of its speakers. And in fact, language changes anytime somebody speaks it, even a learner, and that this is an interesting and good thing. I think you can probably guess what I what I support of these approaches from how I've described them. Um, and yeah, I think descriptive grammar is like at the basis of how we relate to language. This is not an ulpan as well, that like we're not trying to teach the one right way to speak, but to give learners tools to understand the different ways of using the language, and what they mean in different contexts. And that, in fact, the idea of correctness in a language is not some neutral idea that came from nowhere. It actually reinforces elite cultural capital, because the correct way of speaking is usually the most official, most upper class way of speaking that most people don't have access to. And this is probably true for all the languages that you speak as well. Now, going more specifically into Hebrew and the politics of pronunciation, I've put here I've put here the letters Ain and Chet, because in modern Israeli Hebrew today, most people, including myself, how I grew up speaking the language, will pronounce Ain like the same as Aleph, just like A, like a glottal stop, and Chet the same as Chaf, like Ch. But historically, these letters made the guttural sounds Ain and Chet, and that are still retained in Arabic today. Now, the question of why these sounds are less used in modern Hebrew today is like, it's like this little question that opens up this big Pandora's box of history and politics and culture. Hebrew was revitalized 100 years ago in the context of the Zionist movement. There were different proponents of the revitalization of Hebrew, but most of them were part of the European Zionist movement. And the main mechanism in which Hebrew was revived as a spoken language was through teaching young children in nurseries. And then they would grow up speaking this language, and then they'd go home and speak it with their parents. And this was wildly successful. In fact, Hebrew is the only language to date that has gone from being nobody's first spoken language for almost 2,000 years. It wasn't a dead language, but it wasn't anyone's first spoken language of daily life, to being the first spoken language of daily life for millions of people. But during that process, a lot was also lost. And one of the things that happened with Ain and Chet, for example, is that most of the teachers were Ashkenazi, European or European descendant, and they didn't grow up with the pronunciation of the guttural sounds. And so they didn't teach it to the kids in the nurseries. Now, the people who revived the Hebrew language did want Hebrew to have these guttural Semitic sounds. And it was even the law in Israel for the first decades of the state that anyone speaking on the radio must pronounce Chet and Ain. Like, it was considered part of the language, but what happened in practice, that there was racist stigma against using Ain and Chet because it was associated with Arabness, with Mizrahi Jews. And so people who were teaching and learning Hebrew didn't make the effort to learn how to pronounce those sounds. And also in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and on, many Mizrahi immigrants who could make these sounds because they're like in Arabic, were shamed into not speaking with them because it was seen as, because it was stigmatized. And in fact, there were always many different Hebrews, not just one version. As in any language, there's many different dialects in many different places, and not just the one most dominant kind. I don't know why there's a B there, but anyway. Now, about gender in Hebrew. This is somewhere where we can see a really big change in the language, how language changes to reflect changes in society. For those who don't know, Semitic languages, including Hebrew, are very, very gendered. You can't get a sentence out without using grammatical gender, and they're binary gendered, so they're only masculine and feminine forms. And the masculine forms take precedent. For example, if you're referring to a mixed group of people, even if there's a majority of women, according to the Academy for the Hebrew Language, you should use the masculine form. And if you're using like the impersonal form, like if there's not a specific person being referred to, then it's the masculine form that's used. Now, this isn't by chance, yes? It reflects sexist cultural norms, both in ancient Hebrew and today. And it's not accidental that almost every single language that has grammatical gender in it gives precedence to the masculine forms. And as I said before, language not only reflects social norms, it also reinforces them. And with that understanding, there has been in the last 10 years a very strong movement of feminist and LGBT Hebrew speakers to diversify the use of gender in Hebrew so that it's not only the masculine forms that are used as default. So I've got an example here of a sign that says, לכאן נכנסים ונכנסות רק עם מסכות, which is here you enter only wearing a mask, and the verb for enter has both the masculine and the feminine form in order to include everybody. This can also be used in speech. Like at the school that I work at, it's very normal when referring to the kids to use both the masculine and feminine forms, ילדות וילדים, רוצות ורוצים. And this is becoming more and more common. Another thing that can be done is using a double ending, which is what's in this here. Apologies for participants who can't read Hebrew, but I'm describing what's there. So we have asefat chaverimot. So we have the double ending. Im is the masculine plural and ot the feminine. So they put one after the other. Here it's from an advert on the train. It's an advert for teenagers not to smoke, and it's using a dot to include both the masculine and the feminine endings. Here it's the slash used for the same effect, having the masculine and the feminine endings. And this, by the way, that I put up now is from a conference of the Academic Society for the Study of Language and Society. So it's from like an academic group. And here we have a very beautiful example of like an elegant way to make changes in the language. This is multi-gender Hebrew, which is a graphic way to include both the masculine and feminine forms by adding extra letters that are used for both. So I encourage you to look this up afterwards, multi-gender Hebrew, if you're interested. But the point here is that language is dynamic and it changes, that like Hebrew as it currently is doesn't suit our needs for gender equality and diversity. And so people have taken it into our own hands. And really, there's been a sea change in the last 10 years with this. Okay. I'm going to move on to language in society, which more specifically, the relationship between different languages. And I'm going to read this poem. I'm going to start off by talking about the relationship between Hebrew and other Jewish languages. I'll read this poem in Hebrew and then in English translation. קיצור תולדות האהבה. סבתא הבינה ודיברה תימנית. אמא מבינה אבל לא מדברת. אני לא מבינה ולא מדברת. ואת כל מה שלא הבנתי ואת כל מה שלא דיברתי, אני כותבת. Grandmother understood and spoke Taimanite, Yemeni Arabic. Mom understands but does not speak. I don't understand and I don't speak. And everything I haven't understood and everything I haven't spoken, I write. This poem is by the Jerusalemite Israeli poet Adi Kaisar. And she's describing a very, I won't say universal, but like a very, very standard experience that probably I think I can say most Israeli Jews, including in my family. If you go back to my grandparents' generation, they spoke Yemeni Arabic, Judeo-Arabic, Yiddish, Ladino, Russian, other languages. And often the men in the family would also read, write, and sometimes also speak Hebrew, and maybe also additional languages of where they were from. And my parents' generation understand these Jewish languages, but don't fluently speak them. And then my generation are left with like a bit here, a bit there, a feeling of familiarity and something lost. And the revival of modern Hebrew was a huge achievement, but it was at a cost even within Jewish society. That it was considered to be shameful to speak these other Jewish languages. And here on the next slide, I have a poster from the Gdud Meginei Safa, the Gdud translation issue, like battalion for the defense of the Hebrew language, which was basically a group of young men about 100 or 800 or 80 years ago, who took it on themselves in like a bullying and activist way to promote speaking of modern Hebrew and not any other Jewish languages. The way that they saw it, the Jewish languages like Yiddish and Ladino brought with them the weakness of the diaspora. And the Zionist project was trying to create a new Hebrew that would be strong and do away with the like effeminate, diseased diaspora Jewish way of living that the other Jewish languages were representative of. And then Hebrew was seen as a way of returning to the ancient roots, also as a way to justify the settlement in Palestine, the land of Israel, and also as a way to make Jewishness fit more into the European idea of nationalism, of one people with one language. The Jewish people have not had one language for over 2,000 years, and I think a lot was lost by the attempt to make it so. Now, what about the relationship between Hebrew and Arabic today? So the Arabic used to be the official an official language of Israel alongside Hebrew. This was changed in the nation state law. It was demoted, but in practice, Arabic was never in any way equal to Hebrew in Israel and in the public sphere. Not in teaching, not in speaking, not in signs, and less than 3% of Jewish Israelis speak Arabic. And as an Arabic speaker, like when I start speaking Arabic to people, they are always surprised. Even like in Jerusalem, if I'm speaking Arabic to someone, they'll be extremely surprised, despite the fact that they probably speak good Hebrew. And this reflects the power dynamics, that the group that has more power doesn't need to learn the language of the group that has less power, because they can just tell them what to do. And the group that has less power needs to learn the language of the group that has power over them. It's very practical. Like you need to be able to read your electricity bill, or if you're arrested, you need to read what you're handed and understand what you're being told. If you are Palestinian from the West Bank and because of the occupation, the economy of the West Bank is in a very, very bad way, and you want to work in Israel in order to earn more money for your family, then you need to speak Hebrew in order to do that. If you are a Palestinian in one of the many villages that experience regular settler and military violence, then you need to understand what they're shouting at you. But the people who are shouting at you, they don't need to understand what you're saying. So I've given like a spectrum of examples because there's a spectrum of different experiences, but the power relation is the same, and that's why the vast majority of Israeli Jews don't speak Arabic, despite the fact that almost half of them, maybe even more than half of them, their grandparents spoke Arabic. Like, it's not even that Arabic is a foreign language within Israeli Jewish society. So it's a very sad reality. Also, when Arabic is, never mind, I'll skip to that. I'll skip to that in a minute. When Arabic is represented in the public sphere, there's often like mistakes in street signs. And if you travel in the West Bank, you'll see often that the Arabic is like spray painted out of signs as a very like violent statement of the intent to erase Arabness from the physical environment. And I want to show here sort of that the relationship between the bottom-up violence and top-down violence as it's represented in the language. So what we have here is a street sign to Jerusalem, which says in Hebrew, Yerushalayim, in English, Jerusalem, and in Arabic, it says Urshalim, and in brackets, Al-Quds. Al-Quds is the Arabic name for Jerusalem, the holy city, the same the same root as Kadosh, holy in Hebrew, by the way. Urshalim is not a word that's used to describe Jerusalem in Arabic. Now I have a sign where in this bottom-up violence as expressed on the language, the Arabic has been spray painted out, and you can look at that sign and you can really feel that that sort of grassroots violence. And this sign looks much cleaner. It doesn't give you that same like jarring feeling that like someone wants to wipe out Arabness. And you can see that it has Arabic there, so it's as if it's represented. But what is there in the Arabic is just Urshalim without Al-Quds, not even in brackets. And what this does is, in a top-down way, erase the Palestinian connection to Jerusalem, and by using the Hebrew term for it instead of the local Palestinian Arab Muslim connection to it. And what I wanted to say before about learning Arabic, that we have so few Israeli Jews who speak Arabic today, and many who do are doing it to know your enemy. This is just two of many, many, many Facebook ads that I get encouraging me to learn Arabic, security Arabic, Arabic in order to understand my enemy, for my supposed safety or for my recruitment into the security forces. Okay, I want to end this part with a positive note that there's also really beautiful ways that we can intervene in the politics of language. And this is a project called the Streets of Jaffa in Jaffa today. And it's a project that takes the old names for the streets before 1948, before the Nakba and the ethnic cleansing of much of Jaffa, and hangs them up on people's houses. They don't take down the new names, as you can see in the middle picture, but they hang them up next to it, and it's a way of making the Palestinian history and presence present It also makes you realize how it was changed. Like you see not only what was, but the process of what there is today came to pass. Things that the state tries to make invisible become visible. So I encourage you to check out this very beautiful project. And I think that what I showed earlier about the change in gender in Hebrew is a really encouraging example of how many people's decisions in how they use language can make a difference in society. So moving on to language and linguistic justice in the classroom. This person is Paulo Freire, who was a language teacher and educator from Brazil. And he was one of the main intellectuals of critical pedagogy, critical in the sense of asking critical questions of reality. Critical pedagogy, which is also the basis of where I work, this is not an ulpan, means not accepting our oppressive reality, but rather using education as a way to gain tools to understand and transform it through participatory learning and dialogue. Paulo Freire said that all education is political. And as such, it will either be a tool for continuing the oppressive reality or a tool for transforming it. And it depends on what you do. It's not just about what you teach, but how you teach. And that in the traditional methods of education that reinforce the power structures in society, they're based on what he called the banking method. Why the banking method? Well, it's like the learner is an empty cup and the teacher is an expert who takes their knowledge and deposits it in the empty cup of the learner's mind. This is the idea. The teacher is the expert. The learner is there to learn from the expertise of the teacher. He posits against this dialogic education where every learner is also a teacher and every teacher is also a student. And there's a process of dialogue and problem solving together that the teacher facilitates. And through this way of doing education, we gain tools to also emancipate ourselves in our lives, and not just from what we learn, but how. The feminist educator and academic and thinker Bell Hooks built further on Paulo Freire's educational philosophy, developing engaged pedagogy. I'll just read in her own words. The classroom remains the most radical space of possibility. Bell Hooks was a lifelong believer of how much political potential there is in the classroom. It's a place where we change. We come being willing to be changed, and unlike in most of our life where we're just reacting to things or doing things as we're expected to. The first paradigm that shaped my pedagogy was the idea that the classroom should be an exciting place, never boring. She talks about bringing our whole selves into the classroom, that it should be a place where we're fully alive. And she says, progressive holistic education, engaged pedagogy is more demanding than conventional critical or feminist pedagogy. It emphasizes well-being. Bell Hooks insisted that truly emancipatory education should be good for everybody involved. That means that your working conditions as a teacher also matter. That means that you should care about what's going on in your students' lives outside of the classroom, and that the relationships between you and your work all matter in what happens in the classroom. So highly encourage you to read more Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire. I am where I am and do what I do thanks to them. So what does this look like in practice in the classroom? Here's a few of the many things in the language classroom. So first of all, teachers, rather than the experts or the managers of the classroom, as being supportive facilitators of the learning process, we welcome mistakes instead of trying to get instead of it being something shameful that you should be embarrassed about. It's an opportunity for learning. And we want to develop tolerance for ambiguity. What does that mean? It means that if something's not clear, it's okay. If you don't know the exact right answer, it's okay. And this is great for us as language learners, because if you don't understand everything, if you just panic and you push it away, then you're not going to learn from it. But if you can take a deep breath and be okay with not having understood everything, you can learn and you can keep going. But it's also something that we can learn a lot from politically, that like not every situation is clear. You might think someone's completely wrong, but still have something to learn from them. And I think it's something of the gift of language learning in general, that it takes something that was foreign to us and makes it familiar and like ignites our curiosity for it. And I think that's a gift that it can give us, like personally and politically as well. Back to the classroom. L1 means the language that the students speak. So in a lot of communicative language classrooms, and also most of the time in ours, the emphasis is on using the target language, the language that's being learned, as the language of communication in the classroom, which makes sense. And I'm for it, and that's what I do most of the time. But with the approach of engaged pedagogy, seeing the whole person, I think there's also room for using students' native languages a bit in the classroom to explain things that are more conceptual, and crucially for like emotional support through the process. And yeah, I mean, there's different approaches on it, but I feel that having flexibility around it can make us as teachers more responsive to what our students need. There are many kinds of learners and many kinds of learning. And there's diversity in the language itself, and also in the classroom, and also in how we learn. And we try to bridge the classroom and the street, that like have always this connection between what's going on in society and the way that language is used in practice, and what we're learning in the class, that we're not just learning from like textbooks that don't have anything to do with reality. And that the content also includes difficult subjects, political subjects, and content about society, not just the language as an object in itself. I could go on about this for much longer, but I will move on. But you're welcome to ask more about this later. So now we're going to go on to speaking about This Is Not an Ulpan, which maybe from what I said about how we work, how we can promote linguistic justice in the classroom, you already have an idea. First of all, for those of you who don't know, an ulpan is the Israeli state-sponsored Hebrew learning institutes, where Jewish immigrants to Israel, only Jewish olim, also in the politics of language, by the way, the term olim is used to describe Jewish immigrants to Israel. It means going up. Aliyah is like to go up, with this idea that like being Jewish in Israel is inherently like a higher spiritual state of being than being in the diaspora. So Ulpan is provided for free for Jewish immigrants. And what does it mean that we are not an Ulpan? Well, first of all, as a structure, we are not a government institution, nor are we a private company for profit. We're a workers' cooperative, workers and students cooperative, where the teachers and students, we are the co-owners of This Is Not an Ulpan, and we make decisions together about how it works. And volunteer in different ways um, to make This Is Not an Ulpan what it is. In terms of the politics, so an Ulpan is really not only trying to give Jewish immigrants to Israel the ability to integrate into society, but it's trying to integrate them into a very narrow idea of what it means to be Israeli. It's a very Zionist institution and a very narrow idea of what that means. And This Is Not an Ulpan, we want to give people tools to understand society critically and to change it. And finally, it's also different in terms of our pedagogy, that we teach with content-based learning. So each course has a topic where you learn something interesting about Palestinian or Israeli society, and then through learning, and then you learn the language at the same time. So, for example, we've had courses on Arabic hip hop, the Nakba, the history and contemporary politics of Gaza and the war. I ran a class about hope, about radical and ambivalent hope, a couple of times over the last 2 years. Courses about Jerusalem, courses that are trips in different places, courses about the politics of food. Yeah, and in our textbooks, like the characters in the textbooks are all teachers and students that This Is Not an Ulpan. So like you learn our real stories, and not something that was just made up. And also, of course, we teach Arabic as well as Hebrew. And we teach to people from all over the world for all sorts of reasons. Also, I should say, for Arabic speakers and readers here, you may have noticed that our name in Arabic is Hon Mish Fusha. Fusha is so this is not a direct translation. Fusha is the Arabic, modern standard Arabic, the like classical Arabic. And the idea here isn't that we are against Fusha. It's very beautiful and important, but it's referring to the fact that in Israeli schools, kids learn Fusha and not spoken Arabic. And there's a very big difference between spoken Arabic and modern standard Arabic. And this situation where the Arabic that is taught is not the Arabic that is spoken is another one of the ways that there is more and more division and alienation between Israelis and Palestinians, that like we're not given the tools to communicate with people. It's not seen as something that we need to be able to talk to Palestinians. So that was the idea with the name in Arabic, that instead of having a direct translation, the idea was to think of like what is something about how language works in society that we are critical of, and that we are different to. Okay, so I'm going to go a bit more detail about This Is Not an Ulpan. We're an alternative language school run by our Palestinian and Jewish teachers. We have branches in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, and online. We have about 30 staff members. And we are a democratic space that resists the economic and political forces shaping society. I can say also on a personal level that This Is Not an Ulpan is really like my home, like especially in the last 2.5 years. It's somewhere where I don't have to hide my ideas and experiences, and where I can think together with my colleagues and my students to understand reality and try to change it, where I can bring slogans from protests and teach them to students and then meet them afterwards at the protest and help them translate what was happening. Yeah, it's a very special and important community. I think we've already covered that. So a little bit more about critical education as a tool for social change and what that means in This Is Not an Ulpan. So how we were founded really reflects this. We were founded by a group of friends who went to Ulpan and found it to be racist and not very good pedagogically. And they found that the language they were taught wasn't connected to how it was really spoken. And they had some friends who were language educators themselves, and they set up this experimental language school teaching content-based learning, like courses with content. And you can see here like the timeline of how it developed from there. Um, it started off in Tel Aviv, then in Jerusalem, and recently we've opened in Haifa as well. Um, as well as our Arabic and Hebrew courses, we also do courses. We call them Sham Zelo Ulpan instead of Kan Zelo Ulpan. That Sham means over there. That we do for many different organizations. And we also do many community tours and events. And I would add that also our social media is a big part of the political education that we do. And our students, well, I'm often asked who our students are, and it's hard to summarize it because there's so many different kinds. But in short, the Hebrew students is people who wouldn't fit into a regular ulpan for many reasons, either politically or they're neurodiverse, and our way of teaching is more suitable for them than the like big classes of regular ulpan. Or non-Jewish people or left-wing people. And our Arabic students includes a lot of Israeli activists and people from all around the world. And we are often at protests together, teachers and students. And I'm going to skip that. And I'll just give you a minute to read our principles that I think cover what I've said so far. That we don't learn Hebrew and Arabic, we learn in Hebrew and Arabic. We are wanting to acquire the tools to engage with our surroundings and positively impact society. We don't hide the difficult aspects of life in Israel and Palestine. Every student is a teacher and every teacher is a student. We believe in equality and human diversity. We are committed to non-hierarchical methods and participatory democracy, which is why we are a co-op. And the last and my favorite principle, learning a language always makes you feel a little awkward or funny, and we will build confidence together. We also don't take ourselves too seriously as we go. So, if you like what you heard, you're welcome to join our spring semester that starts after Pesach in mid-April, or to join some of our community events. You can follow us on Instagram to stay updated. Here is your chance to scan the QR code, but you can also just look us up. And for participants in this webinar, we also have a 150 shekels discount. It's about $50, I think. If you use the coupon code CFP when you register, and you can scan that to get to the registration page as well. That's it from me for the lecture part. I'd now love to hear your questions, and we can have the next half hour go according to what's interesting to you.
Well, thank you so much, Tal. Thank you for being precise with timing as well. I think that was very interesting. I think also a lot of people found it interesting based on the activity in the chat. We will send you an email with the recording of this session, and I will include also all the informations on how to register to semesters, and this is not an Ulpan, and the reading code, obviously. I must add one thing before I take the questions. So Tal spoke earlier about the multi-gender Hebrew. I am very proud to say that the person who invented the multigender Hebrew, Michal, is working with Combatants for Peace. So this is,
Yes, I forgot that.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's just
I, I
I
am,
had I had to
yes,
say
I knew
it
that
to
and
have a
forgot.
personal pride. Like,
Good.
yeah. Uh, we have a lot of questions. Some are long, some are more political. I'm gonna start with the like lighter one. Someone asked if you can again pronounce Ein and Het the way they are most of the time spoken and the way they were supposed to be.
Yes, a teacher question. I love it. So as someone who didn't grow up with Het and Ain pronounced, I had to learn them the hard way. So I can tell you that if I managed, anybody can. Um, so and the ways to if you're learning Arabic or any other language with sounds that you aren't used to uh, hearing or pronouncing, the way to do it is not to give up, first of all. The first thing you need to do is to hear the difference. So this question, um, let me say the word chaver and chaver. Can you hear the difference? Chaver, chaver. And that means friend. And ein, ein. That means I. Ein, ein. So the second time I was pronouncing them like properly, like with the glottal pronunciation. If you want to learn how to do them, I can give you quick tips. Het, it's like if you're blowing on your glasses, like, and ein, it's like you're blocking some of the air from your throat, like ah. So you can practice these until it becomes, and then you need to practice it a lot until it becomes muscle memory, and then you can do it.
You guys can try at home. Okay, now on to the heavy questions.
Yeah.
So actually the first question that I received is for CFP, but I guess you could also answer for this is not an Ulpan. And the question is, what does CFP advise about using terms such as genocide and apartheid that we know are triggering to some people we want to reach?
Mm.
Very interesting question. It's actually the kind of questions we also ask ourselves internally. So, Combatants for Peace does use the word genocide since the publishment of a report by the organization B'Tselem, which is one of our um, um, partners in Israel, and so this report is called Our Genocide, and it explains why, according to them, what happened in Gaza in the past 2 years and what is still happening is can be defined as a genocide according to international law, obviously. So we do use the word. We don't necessarily use it in every context because we try to be aware of contexts. One example that I can say is I know some of our supporters in Germany sympathize with the ideas of the Combatants for Peace, but the word genocide is triggering in the German context. So we tend to adapt, but the most important thing is we try to be the way CFP works is we are an organization of Israelis and Palestinians working together. The decision making is cooperative and equally balanced. And so we also try to be as sensitive to everyone's sensitivities, as possible. Um, so Tal, how do you approach that?
Um, Similar. We use the terms genocide and apartheid because we see that as describing the reality here and that it's important to say it. And particularly like within our classrooms, like in educational processes, the correct terminology isn't the most important thing. Like having the right, the most accurate term, like the relationships and the processes that people are going through is what education is about. So for me as a teacher, I am glad that this is not an Ulpan uses these words in our like social media. But in the classroom, if um if I have students who like their emotional reaction to those terms will stop them from being able to engage with the ideas, then I won't use them. It's more important to me to have the dialogue. And sometimes being flexible about what terms you use in what context can enable that dialogue to happen. So yeah, I think it's very similar.
Yeah, exactly the same. Okay, what is your understanding of why some Palestinians, perhaps more who are Israeli citizens, call themselves Arabs, and others rejecting that and wanting to be called Palestinians only?
Um, the Israeli the Israeli Zionist way of dealing with Palestinians is divide and rule. Like Israel has split up Palestinian society into West Bank and within that ABC, Gaza, diaspora, Palestinians in Israel, and treats each group differently. Um, and that has fragmented Palestinian society. There's also pushback to that. And there's also people who've grown up not having a strong relationship or have decided not to have a relationship with Palestinian identity. And I think, yeah, there's there's a lot of different experiences within the Palestinian experience.
And I have a slightly different question about the Druze community, actually. How
Mhm.
are Druze who are Israeli citizens included in the language that speaks to Palestinians versus Arab? Is it
Mhm.
Palestinians and other Arab citizens of Israel? How are they like perceived and
Right. So
treated?
first of all, the Druze religious group extends beyond Palestine. So within areas under Israeli control, there's also Druze population in the Golan Heights that was not part of historical Palestine, but Syria. Um, within Palestine, Israel, some Jews see themselves as Palestinian and some don't.
Is it offensive to call Palestine occupied territories? Doesn't this center Israel and erase Palestine and Palestinian narrative and self-determination?
I hadn't considered that. I don't think so. I think it describes like the situation of occupation, but all the answers that I've given now, it's just like the way I see it, yes. And like you should ask Palestinians too. And but I, I don't think that saying occupied territories is offensive, but I encourage you to use the word Palestine as well.
Yeah, we have very deep questions, and I agree. Like, it's always touchy, like, because we are not Palestinians, so we have also to bring them into the conversation of like, how do you want us to define it? So, for example, like, there's many ways I could define in the post we publish on social media the territories of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I know that our Palestinian colleagues don't want us to use in Hebrew the word shtachim, which means the territories, because it's, like denying the reality, too vague,
Mm.
too further away, it's not here. So I would use West Bank, occupied Palestinian territories, Palestine. But yeah, it's like it's always a debate on how to frame things, and I think Palestinians should also be involved in the conversation on how to define their spaces. Um, to what degree? This is a question about Taymanite, so Yemeni Hebrew, uh,
Arabic.
Arabic, sorry. To what degree did trauma alongside nationalism encourage the loss of Jewish languages? I'm thinking about how one of my Taimani relatives lamented that their mother refused to teach them Taimanite because their mother was so traumatized by violence against Jews in Yemen. The way it was told to me made it seem as if it was her revenge for being discriminated against and pushed out. Is this an unusual example, something common? Is it part of the national mythology?
Wow. What a what a great question and important story. Um, it's not, I've not heard, Kilo, definitely trauma is involved. There are different kinds of experiences of trauma in uh, Mizrahi and Kilo old Jewish immigration to Israel, both in the countries they came from, in the process of arriving, and in how they were treated when they arrived here. The Yemeni experience of anti-Semitism in Yemen is one of the worst in the Middle East. In many Middle Eastern countries like Morocco and Algeria, most Jews had good relationships with their neighbors most of the time. Not all the time, not everybody. Um, so it's a very like multifaceted story. Like I wouldn't say that that is representative from what I understand. But that doesn't mean it's not real. Like it's
Yeah.
also this person's experience and probably other people's as well.
Okay, so a question about This Is Not an Ulpan. Do you consider your work in This Is Not an Ulpan as part of the peace building movement? Um, I know peace and peace building can be contentious. Peace for who, what gets done in the name of peace. So I'm curious to know how This Is Not an Ulpan considers themselves in relation to peace building projects.
I don't know if this is a conversation that we've specifically had around this terminology in the cooperative. So, and if we have, I wasn't part of it, so I can't answer on behalf of This Is Not an Ulpan. I can say that our general way of speaking is more about justice and co-resistance. But of course, we want peace, but we want peace as a result of justice, not as like a way of forcing like quiet and calm, but with the same oppression and inequalities taking place. Um, but I don't, Kilo, personally, I don't, never mind. I think I answered enough.
Okay. Erasure of Palestinians and connection with them is so deeply embedded into Israeli education. Do you know if and how has this escalated since the current government, the current far-right government, came into power, and especially in the past 2 years after the 7th of October, like did this change?
Yes. So I have several jobs and hats, and I can answer that more as a school teacher. I work in a mainstream Israeli school as well as in This Is Not Ulpan, and I also work in a um, educational project that teaches about um, the political reality to Israeli high school students. So I can answer from that experience, that there is increasing repression of teachers who are critical of the government or of Israel or who talk about Palestinians and Palestinian rights. There's also a normalization of violent discourse against Palestinians. And I can't remember exactly how it was phrased in the question, but like delegitimization of Palestinians was already normal before. Like the map that is in every Israeli school doesn't have the green line in it, and it's all Israel. And Kilo Palestinian history and narrative is not taught, unless there are specific teachers who are um, brave and do it differently. And there are many teachers who are trying to give their students a better idea of reality. But there's more and more repression of these teachers.
Since you mentioned that only 3% of Israelis speak Arabic, what are the prospects for scaling This Is Not an Ulpan and over what time frame?
Wow, that's a great question. We often, the thing is, This Is Not an Ulpan is not aiming as its main aim to have all Israelis speaking Arabic. We would love that, but we also don't want to compromise our politics. And the um with the racism and dehumanization of Palestinians the way it is in Israeli society, we would have to really change how we talk about things to be the main vehicle of teaching Arabic in Israeli society. So while we do want to scale up, I'm for there being a diversity of different language teaching projects. And I think that Israelis learning Arabic is a good thing in general, even if it's in with different methods, because it's a humanizing act. Um,
So then we have two questions about This Is Not an Ulpan and like your programs. I guess you already answered that, but we still had questions, so maybe let's go over this. Is there an online version of This Is Not an Ulpan? Could I join from Canada?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we even now have courses in Eastern Standard Time evening. Yes, we have online courses in all of our levels, and check them out on the website.
And does This Is Not an Ulpan offer regular Zoom learning programs for international supporters?
And we have events regularly. If you sign up to our newsletter, we have events, including online events. Not like as often as Competence for Peace, I think, but regularly. Also, I'll say about our online teaching that it's as participatory as our in-person classes. There are some things you can't do, like give snacks or go for a tour, but we do like lots of group work. It's the same like dialogue-based participatory learning as our in-person classes.
There is a question again about the chet. I think it's the chet, I'm not sure. Isn't the R also originally a rolling R and not a the way it is pronounced today?
Yes, the Reish was originally Reish like Arabic, and there are still some speakers who use Reish.
Okay, I'm almost done with all the questions. So if guys you have more questions because we have more time, you can continue sending them to Lindsay. Um, could you elaborate on the significance of Judea and Samaria to both Jews, Israelis, and to Palestinians?
Wow, big question. Um, okay. Um, so the area is known as the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria emphasizes the um, ancient Jewish history in the area. Um, Judea or Yehuda is the southern part, south of Jerusalem, and Samaria or Shomron, the northern part. And the West Bank is used to describe it geographically as like the west bank of the River Jordan. Um, um, Palestinians have been living there for uh, many centuries, and there was ancient Jewish settlements there as well. Um, and today, most Israeli Jews consider the West Bank to be part of Israel, or that it should be, and most Palestinians consider it to be Palestine and that it should be. And yeah, I think maybe that answers the question.
Yes, this question about genocide is more of what I was expecting today. could you talk more about helping Muslim, Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli Americans to talk with other Muslim, Palestinian, Jewish, Palestinian Americans with differing views about Palestine, Israel?
Was that like a slash between the different
Yes,
groups?
slash,
Because
yeah,
because it's a very different way of talking depending on which of the groups
of
it is.
course. So it's like Americans, like either Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli Americans, Muslim,
Yes.
to other. Yeah.
I'm not American, so I can answer that only partly. I'm Israeli and British. I was born in Israel, moved to Britain, moved back to Israel, Palestine. So I can answer like based on my just how I do things, but I think everyone should find their own way in their own context. So the question was how to talk about the genocide. Yeah. Um, I mean, my advice would be to start with the relationship that you have with the person or people in front of you, that like before you try and persuade them of something, um, try and find some kind of common ground so that they have an investment in the conversation and like feel that they're respected by you. Um, like it can be hard when the reality is so painful and devastating, and especially for those of us who have friends in Gaza or family members, if you're Palestinian, it can be very hard to not just speak from a place of like our very broken hearts and or our anger. But if you're really I would advise that if you're really trying to have an honest conversation with someone who you want them to, who you care about, and you want them to see um, that there is a genocide, start off with having some kind of conversation where you find common ground about something, like that you both care about the people between the river and the sea, and you want there to be a better future there. And then you can start with maybe a few stories about specific families and experiences. Um, and then after that, like more sort of human emotional connection, then maybe going into the more legal descriptions. And I think one of the things that's important to say when talking about genocide is that genocides take many different forms, and that many people have in their mind the Shoah in World War II as like the idea of what is a genocide. But if you look, and you can even just look on Wikipedia, like the lists of genocides that have been recognized as genocides, it doesn't need to have 50% or more of the population to be violently killed to be considered a genocide. Genocide is wanting, I cannot remember the legal definition off the top of my head, but something like wanting to eradicate the group as a group and taking steps towards that. So there needs to be an intention, and there needs to also be steps taken. And there is a lot of examples of the genocidal intention in Israeli society from the top to the bottom. And then there is the policies and practice of mass starvation, mass bombings of civilian populations, destruction of the healthcare system, and ability and of reproductive abilities within Gaza. I hope that
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah. Well, I
But
can
yeah, my
speak.
advice is don't start with the stuff I just said at the end, even though it's important and that's the meat of it. Start with like connecting to the people that you're speaking with, asking
Yeah.
them questions as well.
I can speak for CFP. When we use the word genocide, it's based on international law. As you said, it's like it has to come with an intention. There's like a specific, very specific framing in international law. So I advise you guys look up for this when you want to have like a just like a facts-based conversation.
Can I
Now,
just add another thing on that before you continue? A lot of people, when they who are angry at the use of the word genocide to describe the destruction of Gaza, talk about the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, and that the war on Gaza was a response to it. And it's worth pointing out that that many genocides began as a response to violence committed against the group that carried out the genocide. Like it doesn't change that.
Or justifies it
Yeah,
in any way.
but it doesn't change the
Um,
definition.
okay, a question that will require you to imagine the future, I guess. How do you see Hebrew evolving after a few generations, say compared to Old English to modern English, or French compared to Quebecois French?
Oh, I'm loving the language geek questions that have been coming up. Thank you. I mean, all the questions are great. Thank you for this. I don't know. I'm not good at thinking about the future, but it's changing very fast, Hebrew, I would say. Um, and just something for some context for those who are less familiar with the history of Hebrew. Um, Hebrew was spoken by the Hebrews or Jews over 2,000 years ago. And about 2,000 years ago, it stopped being the main language of spoken communication, and Jews in the Middle East began to speak Aramaic, or depending on where they ended up in the diaspora, the languages there. And Hebrew was then used as a language of scholarship and religion throughout the last 2,000 years in different Jewish communities. And there were different varieties of Hebrew as a result. And then it was revitalized as a spoken language 100 years ago. So it has this kind of, there's lots of different stages to its history, but like these three stages of like ancient spoken Hebrew, 2,000 years of Hebrew not as a spoken language of daily life, although there were people who spoke it, and now 100 years of it being spoken. So to understand this question, we have to have in mind that Hebrew is at the same time one of the most ancient languages in the world and one of the newest. Like it has this very unique dual nature to it. And what will happen, how Hebrew will change in the next few generations will depend on what happens here. Like it will depend on the relationship between Israeli Jews and Palestinians, how much Arabic there will be in Hebrew and what kind. It will depend on how conservative Israeli society is, what happens with gender in Hebrew. It will depend on how many Israelis leave and what happens to the Hebrew that they speak in Berlin and North America and many other places. Like, yeah, it will depend on what happens in our future in the next few generations.
Okay, so one last question. It will be the last one, yeah, because time is ticking. How do you deal with fear about Palestinian term from the river to the sea in the Jewish community? I am also aware that this term was historically used by the far-right Jewish Zionists in the 1920s, for example, with meaning active ethnic cleansing.
Such good questions. Great crowd, supporters of competence for peace. Um, thank you for this question. Um, I think, yeah, it's similar to the question about how to talk about genocide in that you kind of hold two things at the same time, like what your way of understanding the reality and how to connect to the person that you're talking to. So in terms of how I understand it, I like the term from the river to the sea because it doesn't have borders in it. And I want liberation for everybody from the river to the sea, all people and living creatures. And when I say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I mean for everybody here. And I know that many or most people who use the term use it in that way. In the activist group that I'm part of, Free Jerusalem and other activist groups, we often chant in Hebrew, מהירדן ועד הים, שוויון וחופש לכולם. From the river to the sea, freedom and equality. And I know that also there are some people who've used the chant in a way to mean that they want Palestine to not have Jews in it. It's not that that doesn't also exist. But mostly as far as I understand, that's not the case or the intention. And most people who say they want a free Palestine mean they want equality, justice, and liberation, not violence against Jews or for Jews, Israeli Jews to leave or be forced to leave. So that's in terms of how I understand the reality around the slogan. In terms of how you talk to people about it, I think it's similar to what I said about how to talk about genocide. That like first of all, you want to connect with the person that you're talking to and like hear where their pain comes from and their concerns. And like find the common ground that you also don't want Israeli Jews to be ethnically cleansed, and that would not that nothing would justify that either, and that it's and that is a painful thing to imagine, and then from that like commonality place of commonality, you can then talk about your own experience of what the slogan means to you, and how you understand its general use.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I just want to read one comment that just came out in the chat. Tal, you are a beautiful spirit and indeed a true bold linguist. Thank you for your time, your ethics, and your excellence. So,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you, whoever wrote that. I haven't been able to read any of the comments because I'm talking. So Benjamin, maybe could you save the chat before closing so that I can
Yes,
read
of
comments because I'd be
course.
really in like I'm talking about dialogic education, but I just gave a lecture and I really want to know what you guys had to say as well. This isn't my general way of doing it, you know.
Do you have any last word before I close up?
Um, yeah, keep asking good questions, and I would just say that learning Arabic has transformed my life completely. Like I can't imagine how my life would be today if I didn't speak Arabic. And it's changed my activism and my way of relating to Israel, Palestine, and to people in it. And I'm not I'm not a particularly gifted language learner in terms of my like how fast I pick things up. And I've taught enough hundreds of students to know that I'm about average or a bit below. I've just stuck at it. So I would just give you the advice that like just keep going and it's worth it, whatever language you're learning. And that the best way to keep learning is to find the things that you are interested in and that you love reading or hearing, and do that in the language that you're learning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Tal. And thank you everyone who joined us today for this conversation. We hope that it gave you tools to talk about the conflict, talk about the occupation, what's happening on the land, but also made you want to learn more, learn Hebrew, learn Arabic maybe, and join classes. I want to thank also Lindsay and our American friends for organizing this meeting with us and helping us with the questions. I want to remind everyone that our joint memorial ceremony, the one that we organize every year with Combatants for Peace to commemorate the victims of the conflict on both sides, will be held on April 20th and will be live broadcasted worldwide. So you're welcome to join, and it will be followed by our joint Nakba ceremony on May 15th. It's a unique ceremony in Israel and Palestine, of Israelis and Palestinians commemorating the Nakba. The Nakba is somehow still going on, so this is very important. And more details about those things will be sent to you soon. Thank you for joining. Everyone in Europe, Palestine, and Israel, have a great evening. Everyone who joined from North America, enjoy your day and see you soon.
Thank you, Benjamin. And thank you everyone who came.